Hello everyone, it's Vesper Starwolf here with another video. And today I thought it would be really fun to go ahead and read out the first chapter of my debut novel, Whispers in the Forest. That way, y'all can see if it's something that you would be interested in reading the whole story of. So I was actually torn on if I wanted to just read out the chapter here on this channel, or if I wanted to read it out and create like a little animatic for it on my animation channel, which I changed the name to Riley Damon Creations. So that way that channel isn't just kind of like a throwaway. I put all my like little animation stuff because I want to be serious about it again. And the old name just didn't fit me anymore, so I changed it. So that being said, I was kind of torn, but then I thought, why not do both? So this one will definitely come out first because I assume the animatic will take a lot longer. I'll have to record me reading out the first chapter using like OBS without the fursuit head so it's not muffled. And then I'll have to create each individual animatic drawing. So that one will take a while, but it is something I'm planning on doing. So I hope this isn't going to be too awkward, just me here reading a book. But a lot of booktubers do that. The only difference is I'm wearing an owl mask right now. So anyway, Whispers in the Forest by Riley Damon. That's me. So first off, there are content warnings. So the content warnings of my book are that this story depicts child neglect, character death, animal death, body horror, ableism, religious fanaticism, plant and animal decomposition, and violence. Your discretion is advised. And I do want to point out, because my editors didn't include this because it's more specified, like yes, there is animal death, but it is talking animal death. Because I know animal death is a big one for people, and I don't know if this is just me or if other people feel this way, but I think it's different, like if it's like a pet or an animal sidekick that can't talk, I don't like seeing them hurt or, well, I don't like seeing them die. It's just different than if like a talking animal, like a warrior cat or like the dragons from Wings of Fire, if they get hurt or killed, it's a lot different to me than like an innocent, non-talking animal. I hope that makes sense. So there is that. So then we get to chapter 1, and you can see I have this beautiful chapter header. Let us begin. A menace tiptoed down the hill, hidden by the browned forest foliage, and heading straight for the small town's even smaller farm. The chickens clucked as they danced around their fenced-in coop, the wind ruffling their feathers. A wolf the color of night slunk out of the forest several feet away and staggered towards them. Its pelt was ragged and coated with dirt as it wheezed heavy breaths. Its tongue lolled out and frothed. Its bloodshot eyes locked onto the fattest hen that lingered a bit too closely to the edge of the fence. The wolf leaped over the flimsy protection with a blood-curdling snarl. The chickens all screamed and flapped their wings for escape, but for the one, it was too late. The wolf snapped its jaws around the fattest hen and ended her quickly. But it did not stop there. The creature stood up and stared at the mess of feathers at its feet. It could not comprehend why it was doing this. It knew it should grab the hen and return to its pack, but the pounding in its brain screamed. The wolf dug its claws into the soil and growled, deep and guttural. It had to kill more of the chickens. It had to cause ruin. Whipping around, the wolf lunged. But, unfortunately for the wolf, the dog began to bark, and a single bang echoed off the hills. And then, you can see, I have a page break, the mushroom drawings, by the same artist that did the chapter header. I'll put their name down here. Anyway, we shall continue. The young girl woke with a start and nearly fell out of her bed as a loud gunshot rang from right outside her house. Her heart pounded as she threw off her covers and hurried to the window on the opposite side of her sparse and tiny bedroom. Stationed on the second floor of the old farmhouse, she could look down into the yard and see her father approach their chicken coop. What happened? She spun around and dashed out of the room, bounding down the stairs 2 at a time. The old farmhouse was large and empty, the rooms around her pitch black. Throwing open the front door, she made it outside just in time to see her father hoist the scrawny body of a black wolf into the back of his beaten-up pickup truck. She stopped in her tracks, staring at the lifeless body. A relieved breath escaped her. She did not recognize the animal. As her father was about to shut the truck bed's hatch, he caught sight of her from the corner of his eye. "It's a not-so-good morning, Genesis. A wolf gone into the coop," the man sighed, his voice gruff and annoyed. "We lost a hen." Her back went rigid at his glare, but he only motioned her over with a nod. Genesis tiptoed over, though her feet felt like lead at the thought of having to be any closer to the wolf's carcass. She stood by her father's side and peered over at the wolf sprawled out in the truck's bed. The thing looked twisted, wrong. Its ribs showed violently through its sagged skin, and its fur was stained with blood from the gunshot wound on its chest. It was caked in mud and powdery dust. "Vile beast, ain't she?" Her father stared down at her, and so, unable to speak, Genesis nodded. She knew that was the answer he wanted. Think she might be the shadow? Genesis wrapped her arms around herself and gave a half-hearted shrug. Her lip quivered as she looked down at the beast. The she-wolf's jowls had drawn back into a permanent snarl that looked like a sneer. As if the wolf was disgusted by the world around her. But was she the shadow? In her mind, she could see the bright moon overhead. It, along with her lantern, had been the only source of light as Genesis walked out into the yard to check on the chickens. They had been frantic as of late, and her father had growled at her to check on them. Genesis had been glad to be out of the house, a feeling that didn't last long. She remembered a flash of white followed by the snap of jaws and 2 piercing red eyes that still managed to haunt her dreams. Then, shortly after, she remembered the color black, the brush of coarse yet warm fur, and a gentle golden gaze. Genesis shook the memory away and looked at the black wolf. Genesis looked deep into the wolf's eyes. These eyes were neither gentle nor gold. Genesis turned towards her father and shook her head. This was not the answer he wanted. He scoffed at her and slammed the hatch shut, making her flinch. "What's still a disgrace to the angel," her father said, making Genesis' stomach churn. "And I'm sure the townsfolk will appreciate it. You want to come?" Genesis didn't think even for a second before she shook her head. Her father simply shrugged and muttered out to suit yourself. He turned to go, but not before he motioned towards the chicken coop, where the distant barking had started up again. "Just don't go near that," he said. "It's a nasty mess over there." Genesis agreed with him. The last thing she wanted to see was the wolf's leftovers. She wrinkled her nose up at the thought as her father went to walk around his truck to leave. He hesitated once more, looked towards the hen house, and gave a sharp whistle that was rough on Genesis's ears. It had the desired effect, however, as the barking ceased and a large and fluffy dog bolted across the yard towards them, barreling right towards Genesis. Her vocal cords stirred enough to let out a yelp before she jumped back. She could just picture their collie's heavy weight knocking her down to the hard ground. just like it had done time and time again. Lucky for Genesis, her father managed to grab a hold of its collar this time. "Easy there, Sally," he said as the dog pulled, her tail whipping back and forth as she yipped and pawed at Genesis. The girl grimaced and stepped further back, her eyes glued onto Sally's long fangs. In her mind flashed the image of a snow-white maw, so different from Sally's brown fur, but the fangs that sank deep into Genesis' skin were the same. Pale red eyes bored into her. Genesis took a deep breath and looked away. Finally, the dog calmed down enough for Genesis' father to release her. Sally sat back on her haunches, her tail stirring up dust as she slapped it at the ground and continued to stare at Genesis. The dog would have to continue her wait. Genesis wanted little to do with her. "Watch out for any more vermin while I'm gone, Sally," Genesis' father stated with a quick pat on the dog's head. Sally let out a happy bark as the man finally walked away to start up his truck. Genesis spared a single glance at the dog before she looked past her towards the chicken coop and the woods beyond it. The trees swayed, ruffled by the same wind as Genesis's hair. Their ancient trunks creaked, the dry dirt around them pillowing out a cloud of dust. Along with it, the blackened spores of a local fungus that grew in the nearby forest. In abundance, the dust formed into a large canine maw that loomed over their chicken coop, casting its shadow over the house. Genesis' eyes widened. She knew it wasn't real. She could call for her father, but he would only see the trees. The cloud swirled up into the breeze like a cobra, and even from this distance, Genesis heard a hiss in her ear. It made her uncomfortable, but she couldn't look away. And, just like many days before this one, she felt the urge to run into the trees. Genesis took a step forward. Sally's ears went back as Genesis moved. She whined, clearly upset by something. When Genesis stood and turned to her, she ran in front of Genesis and woofed loudly. The noise broke Genesis out of her trance. She tore her eyes away from the forest to glower down at the dog. Sally tapped her paws onto the dirt with a whimper as she continued to stare at Genesis with those big brown eyes of hers. They did little to calm Genesis down. Genesis shook her head and turned back towards the house to go inside, but the old building stood over her empty and dark. It sent a chill down her spine. The thought of being alone right now was an unpleasant one. Genesis shivered and, instead, hurried to the truck's passenger door, wanting nothing more than to put distance between herself and the farm and the tree beyond, and Sally sitting in the middle of the yard as she watched the humans leave her behind. And then there's that. And that is chapter 1 of Whispers in the Forest by me, Riley Damon. And then, it immediately goes into chapter 2 with Genesis and her father going into town, and you get to see a little bit more about what life in this town is like. So there is that. If this interests you, I will leave a link to where you can get this book down in the description. So many years of my life went into this book. A lot more than probably what should. I had a lot of struggle writing it, but I learned a lot from writing this book, and it helped improve a lot of my future books, and I'm able to get them out a lot faster than I did with this one. So thank you all so much for watching. Let me know if you like this type of video, and I'll see about doing more in the future. So I will see y'all in the next one. Bye!